friends. Oh, I think maybe I don't have the volume turned off somewhere else. Hello. Hey, guys. Hey, Druid. Thank you for the sound check. I did a bunch of recordings this week, so I had all of my mic settings all changed and stuff. So hopefully I'm loud enough without being completely blown out. Wonderful. Hey, Mod Art. Hey, Robin. Yeah, so it's funny. Awesome. Yeah, Druid had mentioned a number of times recently that, I'm so low, and, I'd done a bunch of gain adjustments and all this stuff. When I was doing my recordings this week, I kept having problems. The volume was so low, and there were some connections that I had to fix and stuff. And then I realized I had this mic on the wrong setting. There's 4 settings, and one is all room, one is just this, one is if you're having a conversation between 2 people, so it does this. So I think I had whole room on or something, which is good if you play music or something, but this mic is not it's semi-pro. It's not the kind of thing that you see in broadcasting, but for my profession, doing voiceovers and stuff, it's the recommended mic. So anyway, you don't need to hear all the details. Anyway, I'm glad everybody can hear me. So happy Friday Eve. What in the heck? Another week just whew. It is absolutely insane. I don't know where time goes. Blessed you're here, so yeah, I guess if I turn the music back on, the music is always the royalty-free site I use. It automatically puts the music at 100%. I'm you couldn't save my volume or even when I'm logged in. Anyway, so today, I have a little bit of Bicentennial intel. I got my hands on a Bicentennial quilt magazine, and I thought we would look at it. And then got to get back to Sarah Josepha Hale. I didn't have enough time to read her the other day, and then, with seminar and stuff, it's just I'm missing her. I got to know what's oh, gosh, Druid, yes. You know what? I listen to a lot of podcasts and things, and I'm constantly having to adjust. It's one of the challenges, I guess, of doing audio work is just, yeah, it's a crazy thing. And with everybody's computers being different, and sometimes, headsets are different than just listening on a speaker and stuff. So I also am going to... I'm going on a little trip this weekend. It's not quilt related. Although I believe there's something textile oriented, but I'm not sure I'm going to get to see it. So we're going to have to play that by ear. But I am going to the Richmond Folk Festival, which takes place in Richmond, Virginia. I used to live there. It's a, great small town, has had its ups and downs with statues recently, but, they have this, gosh, and I can't remember how many years it's been going on. A lot of years. It's probably more than 30 years. They have this folk festival, and they're tapped in with Richmond or Virginia Folk Life, which is, works with people all over the state, and not just traditional stuff. They work with lots of people that do Appalachian music and all kinds of stuff like that. Then they also work with people that are newer immigrants to Virginia. So, the people that have been instrumental in the communities in Virginia, and, there's a program where they can do apprenticeships, which is really interesting. They, I haven't been in a couple years, but I know one year, it was a Korean, I think a Korean mask maker. And, he was an elderly man, and he had students that did a play kind of thing. And then he had an apprentice that was learning how to make these big crazy heads and stuff. It's so interesting. Just really interesting cultural stuff. And then they get musicians and performers really from all over the world. And there's a guy that's going to be playing this weekend. And, Druid, I thought of you because I know you can appreciate this. I don't know what everybody else's musical taste is, but if you are a fan of rock, like rock and roll, kind of the heavier stuff, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, that kind of stuff. This guy, he's from Niger, which is in Africa, and he plays this. It's called Tuareg. I think it's Tuareg guitar, which is a specific, it's a cultural type of guitar playing there in Northern Africa, but the dude can shred. And I would say he plays these guitar solos that are you really shut your eyes and you think you've been transported to a Hendrix concert. He's just amazing. And if you don't like that kind of music, then he's probably not amazing to you. But that is the one thing we're planning on tomorrow night, is to go and see. He's going to be on the big stage on the island. They use this island in the James River, right kind of there in the city. And it's kind of a cool place for concerts and stuff. So, I'll get a little bit of video, Drew. Usually my videos aren't great, just, but, yeah. And he's just so interesting. And I mean, he's he's on stage with very traditional, a North African garb. I think, I think a burnous is the wrong word for it, but it's kind of like a, sort of just a long gown kind of thing, like a nightshirt, kind of sleeves, and I think he usually wears a scarf kind of thing, but very traditional looking, North African garb. But he's up there just shredding on the guitar, you can't even imagine. So anyway, he's our number one destination the first night, and then my niece has got a soccer game. she's a very good soccer player. She's I think in a tournament. So we're going to see at least one of her games on Saturday. So that kind of eats into the folk festival schedule, but family first. And then I think we're going back down there between Saturday and Sunday just to see what else we can see. Past years, there have been, everything. There are throat singers, Tibetan throat singers, whirling dervishes. There are these guys from, I think it's Estonia, that I can't remember what their musical style is, but they have these folk costumes and kind of a little, a dance sort of thing. Lots of Native American groups come in. There's drum circles. There was a Navajo women's singing group one year. I think it had to have been 2018 because I had just lost my grandmother, and I really have no cultural connection to, the Navajo, but I stood there listening to these women, and, they're singing in, kind of in an ancient language, and they're singing these songs that, they've been around forever. And I just I kind of became overcome, and I was just just tears. So yeah, it's a very impactful stuff. And thanks, Druid. Yeah, it'll be a fun end to the weekend. To the week. Yeah, for sure. So it is so humid, you guys. My glasses are fogging up. So I thought real quick, I want to show you the website. I know I don't usually I'll turn my fan on a little bit. Sorry for the fan. So let me see my other screen. So this is Bambino, in case you're interested in looking him up. It's Bombino. And I think this is audio here. I'm not going to play it, but yeah, you could see all of the Sultan of Shred, world's best guitarist, and so on and so forth. So anyway, there's a whole long write-up about him, and he started playing guitar when he was a kid, and all this stuff, and there's lots of videos. And yes, it's funny to see him in the traditional garb with a leather jacket over it. It's completely this mashup of different cultures. Very cool. So folklife demonstrations and performances is usually my favorite place to go. And I was looking at this textile origin stories, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to see this. So, some years they have kind of a little alley that you walk down, and it's kind of a couple of booths, and we'll have different artists doing demonstrations. And I'm hoping that's what's going to be there, because otherwise, if it's just a one and done kind of thing, I'll miss it. But I'm kind of thinking they've mention of sample indigo fabric treatments of Mali, Nigeria's Aso Oke, Ghana's Kente, and then African American art quilts and this kind of stuff. And this group is called the Elegba Folklore Society. I'm not familiar with them, so I'm gonna have to check them out. But this folklore society, I assume that it's based in Virginia. Typically, the Virginia Folklife demonstrations are all Virginia-based people. So this would either be a group that, or people within this group that study this kind of stuff, or they have their own family connections. So they might have been recent immigrants, or they have family connections to these different cultures. So it's really interesting stuff. And I have to say, every time I've been, I've learned something. I've seen, the making the fried apple pies from, traditional Appalachian cooking to a guy that does the racing stripes on old cars, just really cool stuff. So this one, they've got the folklore, this Elegba Folklore Society, doing some stuff. They've got the indigo dyeing and fashions. Lady E, I've actually seen her perform before. She's great, fantastic blues singer. Gourd banjo. I mean, just really cool stuff. And that reminds me that I want to say the last time I went was, I think, 2021, and I was introduced to a whole lot of different new instruments that I had never seen before, stringed instruments from all over the world. They had, it was one demonstration, and I want to say it was 4 or 5 people who were all from different areas of the world, but played on stringed instruments. And they each did a little demonstration of their music. And then the coolest part was to see these people talking to each other, that, they had no concept or contact with these other cultures, and then to watch them talk to each other. And in a couple of cases, you could get to see them playing together. It just sort of riffing and doing this ad hoc, it was totally unplanned. That is the coolest thing in the world. I'm not a musical person, but I have a lot of, interest and respect for people with musical abilities. So I hope to get to see more of that this year. Here's the Adinkra printmaking. Again, stuff I might not get to see because it's... Oh, no, that's on Sunday. I probably will get to see that. So anyway, if you want to just look at this, check it out. You can... I think they probably have some videos in here. It's richmondfolkfestival.org. So it's a pretty cool thing. Anyway, I hopefully will come back with some pictures. I know in past years I've been really bad about... oh crap, I got so into what was happening on the stage and the music and stuff that I didn't get good pictures, but I'll do my best, because it's been a few years and I would really love to share some of this stuff. Okay, so let us look at what I have planned to look at. Check this out. I got my hands on McCall's Bicentennial quilt book, and this is from 1976. I think it could be 75. Does it have a date in it? So I guess they've copyrighted it 1975, so it would have been 1975. Let me switch my camera and let's look at this. Okay. And of course my camera has decided that it's gonna stop working, so give me 1 minute. Every time I switch away from this camera, it wants to just, go to sleep. Okay. Here we go. So some of the quilts on here are really interesting. I mean, we've got, this is, I think, Burgoyne surrounded, and then it's got some text, all kinds of different things here. So I think we've got some interesting stuff to look at. Now, remember, this is a time period when not a lot of people are quilting. There's been some, I think there's been some revival in the late 60s. I could tell you the Freedom Quilting Bee, that was in the art world, kind of getting people interested, and that was in the late 60s. But by the Bicentennial, people are like, quilts. Maybe they're not so fuddy-duddy after all. So this has complete how-tos for 34 designs. I'm very curious to know how good these how-tos are. And also $1.25. $1.25 in 1975. So this like special interest publication, you think about buying one of these kinds of magazines now, special interest publications can run you anywhere from like, I think some of the like the grocery store publishers, they're kind of thinner sort of publications. Those will cost you like, I don't know, $10 or $12. And some of the beefier special interest publications, like the stuff that Quilt Folk puts out, Interweave used to, they're not really the same organization anymore, but some of these, it, I would say cost like $20 or more. They typically are going to be expensive. So let's look at this. We have got Morning Glory. Morning Glory batting. We got that world famous Dacron. And this is interesting. This is talking about a free pattern for a Morning Glory Zodiac quilt. We know that Zodiac stuff was popular. I feel like the 1970s coined the phrase, so baby, what's your sign? But interestingly, in the 30s, there was also a Zodiac quilt that Nancy Page put out in the newspapers. So kind of interesting, between these through lines in our history here. Got that Bicentennial font. And this is the editors of Needlework and Crafts. So, these are people that should not be completely ignorant about quilting. So the guess is this is going to be good instruction. We've got some general instructions. I'm not going to read this because it's a lot. But they say you make the quilt top, you prepare to quilt, you do the quilting, you do some tufting if you'd rather, which means just tying the quilt. Here we have Mountain Mist, which we're all very familiar with if you make quilts. This is an interesting bedroom. I don't know exactly what time period this is supposed to be because we have this beautiful canopy with this lace canopy top. I have no idea what time period that would be from. This is in a building that has got these raw beams, which suggests to me that it's like some type of cabin. Although it's got some leaded glass over here, and that looks a little like, I don't know what that's supposed to be. This a cradle that's saying very like, I don't know, late 18th century, early 19th century maybe. We've got some very colonial furniture going on here. The wash basin. And then we have a grandmother's flower garden quilt, which could not have been made until the early 20th century. So herein we start getting those mixed messages. 200 Years of American Quilting. I'm going to read this one to you because this is kind of what this magazine is about. So it says 200 Years of American Quilting. And by the way, what they're showing here, and I don't think they actually describe this, but if you guys remember when we looked at the Bicentennial and Centennial stuff the other day, these flags, like that is a fabric I think that we saw, and I wasn't super sure exactly what it was, but it is kind of, it seems to be like a souvenir print that maybe came out of that international exhibition in Philadelphia for the Centennial. And then this George Washington thing, I'm sure, is a bandana. So, okay. 200 Years of American Quilting. Americans have never stopped making quilts. From colonial days, when every bit of cloth was precious. Not exactly. Yes, cloth was precious. But the quilts being made were not being made out of, bits and scraps. We know that. That whole idea of precious scraps, that's a different era altogether. Right on up to now. Some of these quilts were gathered together for this book to be admired anew, then reinterpreted in today's materials, aka polyester. We begin with two from the 18th century, both pieced with imported prints, but backed with American homespun. Most of our quilts come from the 19th century, when the quilter's art reached its height with an astounding variety of patterns. Our samplings range from the use every scrap postage stamp to the formal Rosa Sharon, an appliqued best quilt. The wonderful Amish quilts, appearing towards the end of the century, continue on into our own. Their special sense of color and strong, spare design make them particularly appealing today. As a spectacular novelty, we include a quilt appliqued in the Hawaiian manner with giant cutouts. Today, when homemade bed covers are no longer a necessity, we still make quilts for their beauty and our joy in craftsmanship. We're decorating with quilting too, as indicated by our prismatic wall hanging, a primitive picture, and a luxurious table skirt. I saw this table skirt. And to celebrate our nation's 200th birthday, why not quilt in a frankly patriotic theme, creating a portrait gallery of presidential profiles, a field of shields, a magnificent white-on-white eagle. And yes, I have flipped through here. I have seen these things. So, they do have info about this. So the Centennial quilt was made in 1875 when our country was about to celebrate its first 100 years. A portrait of George Washington printed on fabric makes a handsome central block. The framing blocks are actually commemorative handkerchiefs showing all the flags of the world. So that might be the answer to our question about those. All right, so first of all, an 18th century toile de jouy was used for flower panels of this Maryland quilt. Maryland! This was interesting. I will have to get out my Maryland documentation book and see if something like this appears. The fabric made in Oberkampf, which if we remember from our Chintz book, Oberkampf was one of the printers, was of course imported. Lining is homespun, straight panels are joined, then cut for diagonal design. So that's how this appears to be done. These are, they're sewn together straight and then they're angled. You see this piecing diagram here. Oops. So I guess they're showing how, and then trimming the edges. This triangle pattern, I guess, is for the triangles, the setting triangles. And or not setting triangles, that's not what those would be called, I guess sashing triangles. And then here's the quilting pattern. Now you might notice this quilting pattern, very tiny. It's on a grid, and you're expected to get out your big grid paper, make yourself a drawn big grid, and then translate this drawing into that grid. I remember this kind of stuff when I was a kid, and oh Lord, the day that I was able to go take something in it and enlarge it on a copier was fantastic. And the day I got my own printer where I could scan something, then enlarge it, and then print it again, oh my gosh, that was like the most amazing thing in the world. Because I can't imagine doing this. Has anybody had any luck with this? I feel like we talked about this another time, and I think Robin, if I remember correctly, I think you might have said something about enlarging patterns this way. Maybe your mom did. Oh gosh, yeah. It's a nightmare. Okay, this is an interesting one, sawtooth. So triangles and strips among the earliest patchwork patterns. Here, plain panels balance the sawtooth panels, all in white and indigo. And this quilt is New England, circa 1870 to 1890. Really pretty. You got, again, these are half square triangles, so it makes this the sawtooth situation. And there's our piecing diagram. A little more helpful, maybe. Let's see. I'm interested to know, where do we have, let's see, marking patterns. I'm wondering, are we going to get to patterns here in the back? I don't know. Doesn't look like it. I guess I see equipment: rulers, scissors, light and dark color pencils, thin stiff cardboard. Read general instructions on page 2. I guess this is telling you about yeah, I mean, it's talking, but this again is I guess you're just having to measure this out and make your own triangle. I don't see, even for myself, I mean, I have experience doing this stuff. I'm kind of like, what? I got to draft this stuff myself. Forget it. Like, I don't know if somebody who's never sewn before, or maybe only has like garment sewing experience, might struggle to, like, I mean, I'll quit trying to guess here. So this one's called the Rose and Swag quilt, or Rose of Sharon. Rose of Sharon was probably the most popular applique patterns. Most popular of applique patterns. Certainly it had the most varied interpretations. That is true. In our version, the roses and buds are minus their usual stems and thus have a compact medallion effect, set off by a formal swag border. The lovely quilting pattern flows around and between the roses. This quilt was made in Pennsylvania around 1860 to 1870. Pink House Antiques, New Hope, Pennsylvania is where this is credited to. Now here's your applique pattern. Does it need to be enlarged is the question. Oh, crud. I'm going to be losing parts of this. That's the problem with getting old magazines. Now this one, as I was flipping through, I saw this one, and I really like this. Look at this. Have you seen a quilt like this? I wish that there was like just a flat picture of it, but there are these bows, and they alternate in size. And to me, like, if I had seen this quilt, I would say, oh, well, that looks like the 1930s or 40s. It's actually turn of the century, if this is true. It says bow knots are padded for extra puff in an elegant scalloped quilt. Quilting is particularly beautiful in feathered V's and a scrolling border. Pennsylvania, 1900 to 1910. So let's see. Druid says, do you remember the orphaned flying geese blocks that Marianne Fonz and Mary Fonz rescued? I bet the original quilter used that pattern. Possibly. Yeah. Are you talking about the one that was like, I think Marianne had to like strip it down to its bare bones? I think there was one where they had to like take it apart almost down to like the very first seams to get it to lay flat. So what's not clear, so this is an applique pattern. Again, at least in this case, it seems like this may be a little bit easier to replicate, because you've really just got a circle that you have to maybe size that right, and then you could probably fudge these to get them to look pretty much the right way. Yeah, the equipment here seems to be different than the equipment that has given it's given to this other stuff. Scissors, ruler, pencil, tracing paper, tailor's chalk. So, okay, for this Rose of Sharon, we've got scissors, ruler, pencil, thin stiff cardboard, tracing paper, paper for patterns, dressmakers, carbon tracing paper, tailor's chalk, compass, tracing wheel or dry ballpoint pen. So, and then I guess we have kind of the same things here. But yeah, I guess so. Knitting needle, quilting frame, optional. I don't know what all of these supplies are for. The knitting needle is for stuffing in the stuffing. So, although it doesn't necessarily look like it on the bed, this is a stuffed applique, according to what they're saying here. I really like this. I think this is a very cool one. Okay. What do we have next? Postage stamp quilt. So that's this one up here. And then there's square in squares. I know this one as an economy block. Let's see. The first one's squares. Join in diagonal rows, making no particular color pattern, but shading from light to dark and back again. Very easy. Quilting follows the diagonal rows. And then squares and squares are pieced with little square and triangle patches, over 5,000 in all, A true scrap quilt with a pop art feeling, made in Western New York around 1855. Then they have this very helpful color key for all of the, I know this camera doesn't want to refocus, but yeah, there's this whole dark brown, purple, medium brown, cream, purple, tan, cream, tan, medium brown, dark brown, medium brown, medium brown. I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess that's what makes this. Very interesting. And I mean, I know sometimes people want to make a quilt and they want it to be exactly what they see. So, I mean, I guess that would help to match that up. All right. Whirligigs. I feel like I've heard this called something else and I can't think of what it is. So this one is whirligigs explode in a brilliant display of color and movement, making a vivid design almost contemporary in mood. Simple shapes are appliqued to 32 white blocks for the main part of the quilt. The bordering vine makes an especially graceful frame. Quilting pattern follows the appliques made in Ohio around 1860. So this is pretty neat. I like the border. You can see the border it looks like the little sort of these little whirligig pattern piece. It's kind of like a curvy teardrop, is used to make all the flower or the leaves too. So I like that. Oh yeah, here it is. The petal pattern, and I guess you just keep using that. The wallpaper clashes with everything. Yes. Are we talking about this horrible wallpaper? I say horrible. I mean, technically this is like a period, I guess a period appropriate wallpaper. My gosh, the curtains are the same. Blech. Sorry to anybody that still has that wallpaper. I guess it'd be like, oh gosh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. What is the Waverly? I feel like Waverly made all this stuff back in the 80s and 90s. I don't know what they were up to in the 70s. All right, so this one's called Missouri Beauty Quilt. This has got another name too, and I'm blanking on it right now. But this says, Missouri Beauty hangs dramatically from a high railing to give almost full display to its strong symmetry of design. Small applique blocks are joined on the four sides of the piece blocks for an interweaving pattern of sharp and soft elements. Compare quilt with its cousin on page 27, New York Beauty. Quilt above comes from Missouri circa 1880. So, okay. The drapes and carpet are also different floral patterns everywhere. Yeah, let's look at that again. Ugh, yuck. I'm sorry. There are just things I love and things I do not. Yeah, there's a lot of ick going on there. All right. I like this quilt too. This is a nice quilt. And I guess they are comparing, like, this part is probably what they're comparing to New York Beauty because it's, it's all those little diamonds. They're kind of long diamonds. Okay, Burgoyne Surrounded. I was right. There's like an Irish chain aspect to Burgoyne Surrounded, and I think sometimes like I've messed that up. So this one says, Burgoyne Surrounded, pieced entirely with large and small squares and rectangles, creates an impression of surprising delicacy. The quilter, Eulalie Woodhouse, was so proud of her perseverance that she made her own personalized border design, giving name, place, and dates. Make your own border using our patchwork alphabet and numbers. Quilt comes from New Jersey. Granny houses. Anytime I see that, like, florals upon florals upon florals, and it's kind of a different era, but when you think about hey, Jill. I don't have the dancing lady in this scene. I'm sorry. I'm not sure because you're 12 months, so I'm not sure what you would have gotten. I'm sorry. I owe you a dancing pattern lady. So they've got a look at this. As if those other, I mean, I realize this is getting super blurry, but I mean, look at this. These are, with the naked eye, I'm having trouble seeing the grid there. What? Their instruction should have just been make a square as big as you want and then just follow this design. Because using these itty bitty, this is crazy. Using these itty bitty grid, that's crazy. And maybe that's the intention, that you're just supposed to sort of follow that. Now, Bergwijn Surrounded is one that's a little bit more complicated. I mean, not that any of these are super easy, but no, chill, it's not the enthusiasm trap. I always get excited when I hear the noise because it's on the screen, and then I realized it wasn't on the screen because of what we're looking at right now. So that was the lack of enthusiasm, not you. It's just I didn't get the the lady on the screen doing her thing. Okay. Now we move on into the 40s or the 30s. These are butterflies. 4 to a block, make very pretty overall pattern. A satisfying way to use your most precious scraps of fabric. The butterfly wings, cut from soft and bright prints, are matched with solid color bodies. Blanket stitching gives a finished edge. An intricate quilting design decorates the white ground, with clamshell quilting all around to complete the picture. From Illinois, 1960. So yeah, they're sure. And that, I mean, this is kind of I think, a pretty popular pattern from like the 30s and 40s. I actually have one recently that I dug up from it was from a Quilters Newsletter magazine, and then I found a reference to this elderly lady that, like, it was her favorite pattern, and it's in this Mountain People book. And then I realized that it's actually a Laura Wheeler pattern. Okay, so this one, Rob Peter to Pay Paul. This is a version of Rob Peter to Pay Paul, which a pattern. It's the concept of alternating two different colors to get this, more often, I think I see Rob Peter to Pay Paul with the orange peel design, or I think we even see it with Drunkard's Path being referenced as Rob Peter to Pay Paul. So anyway, this one is a personal, possibly unique version of the London Borough theme. Red and yellow patches, all triangles and hexagons, seem to change places in a swirl of images. New Jersey, 1880. That's an awfully bright quilt for 1880. I mean, that's a lot of cheddar. And so this is an interesting quilting diagram for something that is not specifically referencing the quilt. This is some other kind of thing that they've taken to show this quilting diagram. Yeah, and here they're showing how it's pieced. I'd be curious to know, and I don't know if there's really any way of figuring this out, but how many quilts got made out of this? All right, so here's the New York Beauty, which is, this is an advanced quilt. I mean, has anybody ever made a New York Beauty, like even a New York Beauty block? I know my mom took a class at one point. I think it was Mariner's Compass. But it's to get those little points, it's not super easy. So could see that being made with polyester fabrics. Drew, did I blip? Yep, I did. Dang it. I better not be unstable this afternoon. It's going to make me mad. Ooh, Drunkard's Path. Look at this one. I don't know if I've seen very many of these. So this is Drunkard's Path with this little, almost like a pickle dish kind of situation going on. Man, I keep blipping. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's been going on lately with my internet. It's pesky. Okay, so here's the piecing diagram. Huh. Yeah, that, I mean, I've seen this where this strip ends up being paper pieced, like foundation pieced, and then these two curved lines then are pieced. But I'm unstable 24/7. Occasionally I have a crutch to hold me up, but quilting diagram is Baptist fans. All right. Oh, now we're getting into some patriotic stuff. Feathered stars and red furrows. And they put them together here. And yeah, that's very, very patriotic. So this first one is the feathered star is Kansas 1885. And red furrows is Missouri 1935. So another hurricane. Yeah. We have been getting rain for the last few days. Now, here's the eagle. It is done. I can't tell if it's hand stitched or not. We'll have to look when we get to that page. But it's clearly using the Dacron, right? That Dacron or Dacron, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I think it's Dacron. Look at how puffy the unquilted areas are. Unless we find out that this has been stuffed, which I don't think it has, because of this edge. I think that's just the puffiness of the... Although these little circles would be cool stuffed, I guess. We're going to find out. So the dramatic eagle emblazons traditional white on white quilt. A simple running stitch forms pattern on back as well. Designed by McCall's Needlework and made by the ladies of the First United Church of Christ Fostoria, Ohio. Interesting. Okay. I love this. So this is the president. And what this says is President's Gallery of Portraits makes a fitting memorial for the bicentennial season. Each appliqué silhouette has names and dates embroidered under it. We've updated by adding a Ford pillow. So I guess being that this is 1975, you've got the quilt that went up to Nixon. This is definitely Nixon. I looked close. And there's a President Ford pillow. That just cracked me up. This one's interesting. So this is a 42 shields. And it is made with what looks like a sort of a shiny goldish brown fabric. I think the shields are really cool. This whatever this fabric is that's in between them is heinous. I think this would have been much, much cooler looking if there like a different color had been used other than that. I don't know what color that's supposed to be. This says light tan, but it's very shiny. It's probably 100% polyester. So here's the applique piece for that. Yeah, so I guess you have to piece this and then you applique the whole thing. The red furrows quilt, here's the instructions for that. Apparently that was a log cabin. Or no, I'm sorry, that's courthouse steps. Log cabin goes in a kind of spirals, whereas courthouse steps goes either side. Okay. Sampler. Now here are the sampler blocks. Sampler and patchwork, 9 giant blocks, each one a variation on a 36 patch theme. I mean, they're all triangles and half square triangles, although the star is not. The star is can't remember what that one's called. It's like Twinkling Star or something. It's got the really long or actually this whole block might be called something different, but I know that star pattern is got those long jaggedy pieces. First, work out your designs on graph paper. We're not going to give you any pattern pieces. Like I said, I'm very curious to know how many patterns or how many quilts are actually made out of here based on these instructions and, came like, like good, successful. This is interesting. So this is fabric in a screen. And I'm just quickly reading here to see. Yeah, it just says panels are stapled to the frame of the natural wood screen. Yeah, there's no special instructions. You just have to have this particular screen. This one is very interesting, the sunburst quilt. Now, what I do not understand is, I was looking at this earlier, these piecing diagrams, I can't quite find this in here. Like, it doesn't, like, it's not reflected exactly. Like, you could find it here, but like this thing in the middle, it doesn't all add up to me. And I probably just need to like get my eagle eyes out and really look for the seams. But some of this, it just, I guess it's just the alternations of the color. It just doesn't look like this. And it's again, it's probably just the colors are just playing tricks on my eyes. But yeah, this thing in the middle is kind of odd, whatever it is. I guess it's supposed to be the sun rising. So here we have a Gerald Ford pillow and the president's quilt. And here are all of their silhouettes. Some of them look like, not a whole lot different, but then again, are men's heads all that different? These you can obviously tell, they have the wig, but yeah. And let's see, this might be Grant with the beard. Interesting. This is the table skirt. Now this fabric is really kind of cool. If you can see it, it's got like just all kinds of stuff on it. It kind of reminds me of, like, I now know now, hey, Making and Musings. This reminds me of like stuff that you can see, like kind of see now. You can go to Michael's and get like these little collage type things. That's what this reminds me of. It's like butterflies and birds, and it's all supposed to be like kind of Victorian looking, but it's sort of not. But what they've done is they have just cut a big circle out of this, probably seamed it somewhere, and then made it into a quilted table cover. I mean, how not useful is that? Because granted, if you put something heavy down, like probably this cake and cake stand maybe is heavy enough, but you put down anything else on top of a quilt, like a glass, like think a glass of lemonade or tea or something, it's gonna be wobbly if it's not heavy enough. I just don't think that using quilts as table coverings is a good idea. Unless you can put something like a glass piece on top of it. Anyway. And then bear's paw quilt. Are we missing a page? Maybe we haven't gotten to that yet. Okay. Now here is this primitive parlor scene. It's not terribly interesting looking. There's this person reclining in a chair. I think this could have been something much more interesting. I'm sorry, Susan Hess, who designed this. Yes, Druid, right? Wine glass. Somebody sets a wine glass down on your quilt covered table, and you've got spilled wine and a quilt that now needs to be cleaned. Let's see, these bird and blossom quilt. Now, these definitely have a album quilt feel to them. This one in the middle here is very similar to something that I've seen was a Nancy Page applique. So, you could definitely see over the time period, you can see the maybe what they were looking at to see. Broken glass, drippy candlestick. Yeah, like nobody wants to use a quilt as a table cover. It's just not good. Now this, the puppies and the kittens, Jill actually has a period quilt of this, if I'm remembering correctly. And it might just be kittens, and I can't remember if they're mixed or not, but this is definitely a common newspaper quilt. You know, I would say 1930s, 1940s. These nursery patterns were very popular. And it says the designer is Gertrude M. Rice. Maybe, but unless she's the name in the newspaper, I question that. Now here is our eagle. Yep, it's mixed. Okay. So, you know, it's only part. I guess if you want the rest of the circles, you have to on your own shift them over and get them over here, because they only gave us this much of the pattern. Now, if you were to buy something like this today, you know, it would fold out. It would be big. Look at its miserable face. This eagle has seen some stuff. Its head looks a little bit like a turkey. I'm not going to lie. Poor eagle. Poor guy. Oh, this is interesting. I didn't see this before. So we've got a buyer's guide here. Let's look at this real quick. So the Bloomcraft fabric for the table skirt was from Fabrications in New York City. Unbleached muslin. I was just listing some. Oh, Macmillan Arts and Crafts, which was in College Park. That's near me. Let's see. Quilt top and backing fabric. It's just Mary Maxim, Lee Ward's, Hirschner's, Stearns and Foster, which is Mountain Mist. Calico Fabrics, Vermont Country Store. Now, my mother told me that she used to have to order fabric from the Vermont Country Store, those reproductions, because you could not get them in, just walking into the fabric store. They just didn't have like little calico prints at this time. So it's very likely my mother looked at, maybe not this magazine, but something similar, and saw the Vermont Country Store and looked there to order something. I'm just looking through here. We've got, again, like some Hirschner's, Mary Maxim, quilting needles, hoops and frames, Lee Ward's, Hirschner's, batting, Stearns and Foster. Yeah. Quilt patterns, Aunt Martha's, Mrs. Danner's. Yeah, these are all names that we are familiar with. So, let's see. Robin says, I have a very dear friend who had to stop from picking up burning candles from another friend's table. Every time she did, she somehow managed to spill what's on an antique tablecloth. Oh, poor friend. You can't just put those friends at the kids' table. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm sort of klutzy. I tend to be one of those people too. So I'm always very careful at other people's homes because I don't want to knock something over, ruin a thing. Now this, okay, I have made a small Hawaiian quilt. It's a little, like a wall hanging kind of thing. When I took the Quilt Folk, the passport class on Hawaii. This is the breadfruit tree, which is typically the one that they do have you start on. Although this is a really complicated version of it. The version I did, it had the big bulby things, which are the breadfruit, but the leaves, the leafy parts were much more like small. They weren't this detailed, I guess is what I'm trying to say. This would be very difficult. This is not something that is for a newbie. So I can only imagine a person going, I want to make the Hawaiian quilt, and they get out some paper and they try to do this. Just doing this on the paper, like full size, to make this, I mean, this is tough stuff. I I'm really shocked they would have this in here. Okay, here's the bear's paw. And this is really nice. This is a purple and black one. So this is from the Ohio Amish around 1925. And then, the broken star. This one is, it's a beautiful quilt. I feel like I've looked at stuff like this before, and it is not an easy quilt. It's really interesting to me that, there's stuff in here that, like, okay, so the bars. Amish bars, this is a more simple design. And when my mom was designing patterns back in the 80s, like, this is the kind of stuff that she designed and taught classes in, because this stuff is, you can make something that's really stunning, and not just kind of a cruddy little, 9-patch. No shade to 9 patches. They can be fantastic, but they're so repetitive. But this gives you, a lot more, design room for the quilting. You can really showcase some fabrics in here, and it's not all the same, like, patch over and over and over. This is the kind of thing that people should be starting with, not, this. This is like master quilting. This is the kind of thing that a confident beginner can manage if they have good information. I am not throwing shade at the 9-patch. Come on now. My very first quilt was like a giant 9-patch. So, okay. And now the quilting patterns are very traditional for an Amish quilt. And this whole thing is falling apart. Get the tape out. That chain or cable pattern, that's definitely very, very Amish. This feathered wreath, I guess, that also very, very common for the Amish. This is interesting. Shadows. So this is also Amish. Oops, sorry, I didn't have that's really pretty. I like that. Yeah, I like the Hawaiian quilt too, Druid. It's not necessarily a newbie. I mean, maybe for a confident beginner who has had some good instruction, and maybe has a more simple applique to do, would be a good. I just, when I say, like, I have obviously seen people that make quilts as their first quilt that are, they jump in and they make a mariner's compass, because they don't know any better. They think that it's all quilting is supposed to be that hard. But those people are typically rare. Most people, when they want to start quilting, they see something beautiful and they'll give it a try. And if they don't have a class to take or, a very skilled person to show them how to do it, they get frustrated, or their first one doesn't turn out well. So they just say, meh, I'm not good at this. So it's kind of unfortunate to me that it seems like these sort of things are being introduced. Just be like, hey, go bake a quilt. And these are not particularly easy things to do. And this is the end. Let's see. Save those scraps. So look at all these things you can make with your scraps. That's kind of interesting. The rest of these things appear to be little toys and things. Oh, there's a cat hanging out. So I guess this is a magazine. Some of the features. Yeah. Okay. Popular handcraft and hobbies. Okay. Well. Quilter's newsletter. Looky there. And that is the Bicentennial magazine. Yeah, Druid, I get it. There are some quilt patterns that I absolutely love, but I have some skills. I know how to do stuff, but I just, like, Mariner's Compass is one. I've made a very tiny Mariner's Compass block that was for a big kind of collage applique quilt I made, and I literally made it out of English paper piecing. I printed one out on cardstock and I English paper pieced it because I tried to mark and get everything, and it, like, kept turning out like all funky. So, I think there are just some designs that, whatever your skills are, easier or harder. And, like I said, some people, I've seen newbie quilters make stuff that I'm absolutely like just stunned. Like, how did you do that? I've been quilting for a long time and I still can't do that. But then there's just as many people, I think, that it's good to start off with a 9 patch and enjoy your fabric, learn, all of the ways it goes together and kind of what you're good at. So, all right. Are we ready for some Lady of Godeys? I miss Sarah Josepha. So, as a reminder, we have been reading The Lady of Godeys, Sarah Josepha Hale. It is by Ruth Fin. Work on the points. I am so bad at piecing, particularly machine piecing. I think my hand piecing isn't too bad, but machine piecing, I never have points for my machine piecing. I don't care how carefully I measure, how carefully I cut, how carefully, I think the only thing that's really helped me is literally to mark my seam lines. And that's the only way that I've gotten to work. And not to use the seam measurement, like the seam guide on the sewing machine. It's never right. Okay, let us get in here. So, we are reading chapter 7, The Victorian Tide. And I think we're going to get into some of the stuff that I had been hoping we would get to. Maybe. Every chapter has been a surprise in this book. I think I know what a particular chapter is going to be about, and it's about something totally different, some kind of amazing thing she did. So, chapter 7, The Victorian Tide. All right, let me turn my fan off again. In the February issue of 1839, Godey's lady editor printed a threefold prophecy that has been fulfilled. Victoria's reign will be one of the longest in English annals. Now that's interesting because Elizabeth II reigned longer, right? I think. But Victoria reigned for a really long time. But 1839, Sarah is already predicting that? That's interesting. Is it because she's a lady? Maybe. So Victoria's reign will be one of the longest in English annals. She may so stamp her influence on the period in which she flourishes that history shall speak of it as her own. It will be the Victorian, as a former one now is the Elizabethan age. So predicted the Lady's Book, an American magazine, 2 short years after Victoria of England had ascended to her throne. It was a long reign, the longest in English history, lasting 64 years. The Queen did so impress her influence that not only her own period, but by and large the entire 19th century has been identified with her name, even as the 16th century is called Elizabethan. All exactly as prophesied in Godey's. That's interesting. But to the mind of the 20th century, Victorianism connotes none of the lift and glory that are the enduring tradition of the Elizabethan age. There has come to be criticism, resentment, ridicule of the very term. Why? Why indeed? Because, what we've learned is that Queen Victoria herself was actually kind of a forward thinker in some ways. I mean, remember, she got the ether for one of her children, and now I can't remember what his name was. Rufus? I don't know. I don't think Rufus is right. But if we remember, oh gosh, can I find it quickly? Maybe not. In any event, we do remember Queen Victoria was like, you know what? That childbirth with no painkillers, BS. Give me the drugs. So from that perspective, she's a forward thinker. And I know that there's lots of other things about Queen Victoria, other than the fact that she basically mourned for the rest of her life when her husband died, when Prince Albert died. But I mean, I really think of her as kind of like a forward thinker, with the exception of some of the and well, you know what, I'm thinking like some of the ceremony and the process of the Victorianism. I'm kind of wondering, is it so much Queen Victoria herself, or is it the people, the Victorian people, Victorian era people that have decided on all these fuddy-duddy things? Let's find out. So, there has come to be criticism, resentment, ridicule of the very term. Why? Certainly, the answer cannot be found in the development of steam in transportation and power, or in application of electricity to communication and light. Who shall deride the railroad, the steamship, the telegraph, the telephone, each an achievement of the Victorian age? No one thinks of the Mexican, Civil, or Spanish wars as Victorian, nor is anyone embittered by memory of such territorial extensions as the annexation of Texas, debatable as it once was, or by recollection of such migrations as the settling of California. The conquering of the wildness of the West does not lend itself to ridicule. These pioneer victories of expansion have become epic, yet they were part and parcel of the now despised Victorian era. Well, and that's the difference between what was happening in the U.S. and what was happening across the pond. The discovery of anesthesia, the advancement of medicine, equal education for women, a just wage for labor, indeed, the whole of humanitarianism, all of this is rooted in the very heart of the much criticized 1800s. But scarcely are these essential strands in the fabric of modern life thought of as Victorian, nor are they in what has come to be the 20th century's understanding of the word. What is it then? Every century has its peculiar tide of thought, wrote Sarah Hale in the preface to her most pretentious work, Women's Record, a foot-high volume of some 900 pages. My God, when does this woman sleep? She's editing. She's campaigning for stuff. She's writing 900-page books. I mean, I love Sarah Hale. I'm absolutely enamored with this woman, but also she kind of is making the rest of us look really bad because we don't have her time and tenacity, I guess. Like all moral and social changes, the one now going on in the public mind has its absurdities and its errors, she went on to observe. With this key supplied by so keen a contemporary intelligence, speaking at the very moment when Victorianism was in the full cry of establishing its tenacious influence, the riddle may be solved. Here is suggested definition not only of the Victorian detail, which is the butt of today's ridicule, but of the whole which that detail has obscured. Victorianism, then, was a peculiar tide of thought resulting from the moral and social change. Two questions immediately arise. What were the peculiarities of that tide, and what caused the change? The peculiarities of the Victorian thought tide, all the more striking because so inconsistent with the forthright action of the period as expressed in its political, humanitarian, and mechanical progress, resolve themselves into four major traits, as critics of the era are ever scrupulous to point out. They are prudery. Yes, we know this one. A modesty so false as to discourage women's acceptance of masculine medical aid. Okay, so you're prude if you can't go to a male doctor. You have to have a woman doctor. Piety, not religion, but a dogged adherence to some such outworn dogma as that which fought anesthesia. Okay. Sentimentalism, most apparent in the overwhelming flood of emotional writing. And hypocrisy, manifested by an artificiality of manners, by an assumed, though of course never actual, suppression of natural instincts. That's you, Prudence. These four pretenses, breeding inhibitions that hampered in both their observance and their breach, are the absurdities and errors so antagonistic to present-day realism. They are less antipathetic to Sarah Hale only because she was able to recognize them as results of a change, of a revolt from the lasciviousness and the crude that was the 18th century. So the 18th century was lascivious and crude. For Victorianism, its broader aspect was just that, a moral and social revolt. The 18th century, culminating in a high peak of unrestraint, impinged more closely on mid-19th century consciousness than the calendar would suggest. The flow of events takes no count of arbitrary divisions of time. The profligacy of the 1700s lasted, in fact, until the very day Victoria was crowned. The Queen's own parental background sufficiently illustrates the debauchery of her era The Queen's own parental background sufficiently illustrates the debauchery her era was called upon to correct. Well, I don't know royal history that well, but I do know, like, all of the Georges before Queen Victoria, like, all of them had issues. Like, I know one was insane. One started wars. I can't remember. So I guess George III was the crazy one. After ever more frequently recurring outbreaks of violence, George III was at last pronounced hopelessly insane. So I guess he was insane and starting wars. He had been mad for years. Yeah, I think they called him Mad King George, I believe. And in 1811, Parliament conferred the regency on the Prince of Wales after George IV. The Prince Regent's private life does not adapt itself to detailed description. He had but a dull mind at best. So at best, he was super stupid. Yet he really was interested in three things, though only three: women, wine, and revelry. Okay, so her father was a cad. Even in the midst of his revelry, he was prone to fall asleep. He early became so fat that he had to be trussed up in corsets. So he's fat, sleepy, and a womanizer. Sometimes his boundless indulgence made his stays unbearable. Then, untrussed, he presented a monstrous spectacle of deformity. Oh my God. His wife bore him one child, a daughter, the Princess Charlotte. Okay, so is this not... Oh, this is George III? Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting confused here. No, wait a minute. I thought this was Victoria's father. Let me go back here. Okay, the Prince Regent. That's George IV. George IV. Okay. Then untrussed, he presented a monstrous spectacle of deformity. His wife bore him one child, a daughter, the Princess Charlotte. On the death of his father, his first act was to lay before Parliament a bill for the dissolution of his marriage. The ministry abandoned the bill, but the king retained his mistresses. You notice that's a plural, not mistress, mistresses. It was in 1820 that the Prince Regent became George IV. The Duke of York, he's representing all the dwarves and all of the deadly sins at once. Sleepy, sneezy. So the Duke of York, second son of George III, openly lived with a succession of women, the most notorious of whom was a Mrs. Clark. Mrs. Clark. Though long married, he had no children. The third son, the Duke of Clarence, married late in life after having sired a large family of illegitimate sons and daughters by an actress. You know what? Do these kings, like, keep it in their pants? Clearly not. Or dukes or princes, any of these royalty. His duchess bore him two children, both of whom died before he became William IV. I am so lost here in all these people. Who is Queen Victoria's father? I should know this, right? Oh, God, we've still got multiple pages to go. But, all right, let's keep going. The Duke of Kent, next in line, was a martinet, so domineering and cruel that even in the midst of universal harshness, he had to be relieved of his duties in the army. After that occurrence in 1802, he seems to have divided his time between his mistress, Madame Saint Laurent, and plunging deeper and deeper into debt. Okay, there is nothing redeeming about any of these rulers. The fifth brother, the Duke of Cumberland, was thoroughly hated and feared by all. It would have been a tragedy, indeed, had he become the king. His amorous entanglements were super scandalous even for his times. Okay, even Ruth Fin is saying super scandalous. Hideous in personal appearance. These people are all ugly as heck. Okay, Druid, thank you. Thank you. Okay, fourth son of George. Okay. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet, I don't think. Prince Edward Augustus. Okay. Yeah, we haven't gotten to him yet. Oh, there were 12 children George III had 12 children. Okay. So, the fifth brother, the Duke of Cumberland, was thoroughly hated and feared by all. It would have been a tragedy indeed. Hideous in personal appearance, violent in temper. He was suspected of murder itself. So he's an ugly, violent murderer. The sixth son was the Duke of Sussex. He had two morganic wives. Morganatic wives. What is morganatic? All right, Druid, if you're near your keyboard. Morganatic. Yeah, that's not a familiar term to me. So, two morganatic wives, Lady Augusta Murray and Lady Cecilia Underwood. He was liked by the people and by all odds seems to have been the most decent of the lot, the Duke of Sussex. According to some historians, the Duke of Cambridge, seventh and youngest son of George III, never married. Okay. So Jen says it means non-royal. Okay. Morganatic means relating to a marriage between a member of a royal or noble family, someone of lower rank. Okay. So lower ranked, and their children do not inherit the higher status. Okay. Yeah. So that's like the consort, right? Or maybe is a consort maybe where you can provide the... I don't know. The royal stuff is so complicated. I mean, honestly, it seems like a bummer to be a royal. I'll be honest. You know, they have... And I mean, it's hard for me to speak on this, honestly, because I'm an American. I'm not in any country that has royalty. But, yeah, it seems very complicated and awful to be a royal. Okay. So Duke of Cambridge, the seventh and youngest son of George III, never married. According to others, he did. In any event, for reasons of his own, he preferred the continent to England. So he scurried off to Europe. The seven brothers had 5 sisters, 2 married without issue and 3 unmarried. Heir presumptive to the throne of England until her death in 1817 was Princess Charlotte, only child of the Prince Regent. I want to say... let's see, does it get into... Yes, it does talk about her marriage. And if you remember, we saw the chintz in the chintz book. We saw the chintz that was released specifically for the marriage of Princess Charlotte. It was pretty. It was one of the color plates in that book. Okay, so she's the only child of the Prince Regent. She was a tempestuous girl, prone, like the male members of her family, to love intrigues. These people... Her name was linked with those of several princes and at least one commoner, a captain in the palace guards. Well, honestly, good for her. If the guys are going to be up to it, she should be able to as well. At last, on the rebound after one of these affairs, she consented to marry, in 1816, Leopold of Saxe-Coburg, an ambitious but impoverished young prince whose family estates had been seized by the French during the Napoleonic Wars. Oh, goodness. Had Princess Charlotte lived to succeed her father, Leopold would have been prince consort. Okay, so that's how the consort thing turns out. I guess you still have to be, like, somebody landed gentry, royalty of some sort. But she died in childbirth, and his child died with her. So, even so, Leopold, future king of Belgium, was to sway destiny in England. Though there were 12 children of George III living, there were now no grandchildren. Holy Moses. I mean, that's crazy. So 12 of his children are living and there are no grandchildren. That tells you a lot about child mortality, but also it's amazing that 12 of his children were still living. Although there could be like 100 children, but the way these men got up to mistresses and whatnot. So no grandchildren. It was expedient for the succession that the Dukes of Clarence and Kent, third and fourth in the hereditary line, should marry. Of more than state expedience was marriage to the Duke of Kent. At the age of 50, he was so sunk in bankruptcy that he was at last willing to make the nation his debtor. But he wanted it clearly understood that if he thus curtailed his liberties, he expected the government to add £25,000 a year to his income, pay his debts, and pension off his mistress. So they have demands if they're gonna, you know what? All right, I'll be the king, but Oh my goodness. As his bride, he chose the widowed sister of his nephew by marriage. Oh, widowed sister by some. Okay. So Prince Leopold, Victoria Marie Louisa, Princess of Leiningen. Though she had had 2 children by her first husband, she was but 32 when she married the 50-year-old Kent, May 29th, 1818. Princess Victoria was born May 24th, 1819. In 1820, the Duke of Kent died. In 1827, the Duke of York died. Okay, so now they're all dying off. In 1830, King George the Fourth died, and the childless Duke of Clarence became William the Fourth. Alexandrina Victoria, daughter of the Duke of Kent and the sister of Prince Leopold, was the heir to the throne. So I did not know that her mother, and who did we say that was? We didn't say that her mother. Yeah, we didn't have her mother. Good grief. Okay. Meanwhile, the Duchess of Kent had a hard time of it in the midst of her 6 jealously vindictive and licentious brothers-in-law. She hated them all, and they all hated her. Meantime, too, the ribald example of the court, aped in all the loose moral tendencies of the nobility, had undermined all classes. A laxity of conduct was everywhere rife in England during this aftermath of the 18th century. Nor was the decadence of the period confined to Britain. Responsibility, governmental and personal, was at low ebb in continental Europe as well. Seems like things don't always change, but... And I'm including us in that. Everything. Okay. So Victoria's mother was Marie Louise Victoria. Yes, the Dowager Princess of Leiningen. Man. The intermarriage and all the oh, okay. By the end of the first quarter of the new century, reaction set in. Discontent developed. Thus, France was to reel from one upheaval of state to another, while in England, revolution was averted only by the collapse of a 40-year-old Tory government and passage of the long-agitated Reform Bill, which vested new power in the House of Commons and made it more representative of the people. Whew. In America, of course, affairs were at a less desperate pass. For one thing, the young government had managed to keep itself clean of the taint of aristocracy for the time being. For another, a new and undeveloped country invited the people to healthful occupation. Yet there were dissatisfactions, for at best, life here was crude. Practically all refinements still came out from England. This was especially true of letters. Most magazines and books were imported, or, as previously noted, reprinted here. In either case, they were English, reflecting Britain's social discontent. Why not a change in America, too? Even the local news sheets began to take on the critical tone of the English journals. Soon, rebellion was in the air, here as elsewhere. Politically, the change came with an unexpected swiftness. For 50 years, a government of gentlemen had obtained in the United States. True, and I'm just grabbing info to cite me in your thesis. Yeah, it's if it's Wikipedia, it's good enough for me. But yeah, always get more. If you're gonna write a paper. So in 1828, democracy was represented by Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe, was overthrown by the New West. The frontiersmen, who in the transitory order of migration theretofore had played little actual part in affairs of state, swept General Andrew Jackson, the protector of the people, into the presidential chair. Jackson's victory followed the vilest campaign America had experienced. Oh, we hadn't gotten to 2024 yet, had we? Or 2020, or 2016, or... Jackson's victory followed the vilest campaign America had experienced. His private life was riddled, with or without cause. His wife was slandered, a circumstance believed to have hastened her death. Oh my God, poor woman. Which occurred just before the inauguration. Later, President Jackson made social Washington's acceptance of Mrs. Peggy Eaton, a woman whose name had been shamefully linked with his. Oh ho ho. A major issue of his administration. Obviously, things don't change. It was all quite uncouthly frank and very Georgian. Even though politically Jackson closed America's 18th century, Victorianism was to finish the job socially. This is all very interesting. Pernicious examples, Godey's lady's book called The Seven Gross Sons of George III in an editorial on Victoria's coronation. Oh my God, the seven gross sons of George III. Remarking that, although the hereditary sovereign of England has very little real power in the government, on manners and morals, his or her example acts with tremendous effect. And so, Victoria's accession in 1837 found both England and America prepared to turn a new moral and social leaf. There was not the need of reform here that there was in England, but there was enough for the younger country to join the hue and cry when Lord Melbourne, a deserted husband of Byron's famous Lady Caroline Lamb, started to clean up English society in the name of the girlish queen. She was a heaven-sent figure of youth and innocence. It's kind of interesting. I've heard very little comparisons between Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth. But the one comparison that I have heard is about both of their start, to the throne. On the throne was, the youth and the innocence. Queen Elizabeth was known for her practicality, but it's interesting how they both started really as young women and ended up having these really long reigns. Victoria's best publicity agent was Lord John Russell. He was an excellent psychologist and an effective orator. To his rapt public on both sides of the water, he ran the gamut of the Queen's virtues. He stressed the seclusion which the Duchess of Kent had imposed on her daughter in order to keep her unsullied by too frequent contacts with the horrid old paternal uncles. Well, that is good. The Duchess of Kent kept her daughter away from those men, which is a very good thing. Victoria was good. Had she not said she would be? She was religious. She was pure. Her life now was dedicated to becoming virtue's own example. Let all her people follow the young queen in rules of conduct. This was a bit hard on Victoria. Not that she desired really to emulate her masculine relatives, but still she was young. All her life, she had been dominated by dowdy German influences, by her mother, her shrewd maternal uncle, Prince Leopold, and two attendants of the latter's choosing, Friedrich Stockmar, a German physician who, accompanying Leopold from Coburg at the time of his marriage to Charlotte, had remained in England, and Louise Lezen, also of Coburg, governess to the Duchess of Kent's children by her first marriage. As princess, Victoria had not been allowed even to walk down a flight of stairs without someone holding her hand. Whew. And the first order she gave after she had been notified of her accession was that her bed be moved out of her mother's apartment. Oh my God, so she had to sleep in the same room as her mother. Long had she yearned for the privacy of a room of her own. She was going to get that much at least out of being a queen. Poor girl had to become a queen just to get some time alone. And my guess is she probably didn't have much time alone despite having her own room. So there were things that Lord John had to gloss over as best he could. He said nothing about the times Victoria danced all night and breakfasted at sunrise. He did his best to suppress any stray hint of scandal that still persisted in clinging to the gossip-accustomed court. And certainly he never told of the pitched conjugal battles that after her marriage raged between Victoria and the Prince Consort Albert, until at last Albert, Stockmar's creation, dominated his wife and so subjugated the Queen. Well, that's interesting because, we hear and maybe it's just I'm not that educated on royalty, but I never hear anything bad about Albert. After he died, again, she's in mourning all her life, so she loved him very much. It was Leopold, chosen first king of Belgium in 1830, who, with British assurance of neutrality for that country faith fully manipulated by Stockmar, arranged his niece's marriage with her German cousin Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha in 1840.
But before that event, with all of its reactionary tendencies, Russell and Melbourne between them had succeeded in establishing Victoria, not merely as the girl sovereign of Great Britain, but as Queen of Romance. Quickly, she caught the fancy of the world. To capitalize her popularity was an astute political move. Her ministers lost no time turning a threatened revolt into an acclaimed reform. The little figure was set on a dizzily high pedestal. It had to be high, for she was not prepossessing physically. I want to say she was less than 5 feet tall, if I remember. She was a tiny lady. The following description of the personal appearance of the Queen, we're going to get that, says Godey's Ladies Book for March 1838, is extracted from R. Shelton Mackenzie's correspondence with the New York Star. Did you know that Victoria means Boudica, victorious? Oh, that's really interesting. I did not know that. I know somebody who has a cat named Boudica. And I'm trying to remember. Did we talk about it, or did I read it somewhere? Where Boudica comes from, other than like the term victorious? I can't remember. It's got some. I'm drawing a blank. It's got some meaning, like presently. There's some influence of that name. Okay, so Mr. Mackenzie, who wrote sprightly gossip on a variety of subjects, including high society, appears to have been a fairly good reporter. His description of the young Victoria is doubtless accurate. The Queen, he wrote, is an agreeable-looking young woman with a blonde complexion. Her eyes and hair are light. Her forehead is good. The skin tight on it, but not so tight as to give the glossy appearance, which looks very ugly. Okay, so if you have a glossy forehead, I'm sorry, you're ugly. The lips rather full, pouting and red. Her teeth are regular, not particularly white. Her nose is almost aquiline, and I should call it her best feature. She has rather high cheekbones, and her face, when looked at on the front, appears too broad and flat. She is by no means handsome. Well, she's got a good forehead at least. Oh my God. Oh Lord. Okay. There's more. The Queen's neck is longer than her proportions warrant. Her waist is small. That's you know, she got a good forehead and a skinny waist. Her hands and feet are small, the hands white and plump, loaded with many neat rings. When you see the Queen on her throne, you would think she was fully of middle height, but when she rises, you see that she is of the dumpy genus. This is owing to her legs being disproportionately short. This disproportion causes her to walk indifferently, waddling along, in fact. Wow. This is terrible. Okay, so Boudica was the queen of ancient British Iceni tribe who had failed uprising. Okay. Yeah, there is something about, yes. Okay. There is something about her that recently, and I can't think of what it is, but yes, that is definitely what I had read about her. So there's a picture. Let me show you this picture before I keep reading about this poor queen. Poor woman. So this is what was in the Godey's Ladies book of Victoria. I mean, she's not ugly. Poor thing. So it says a lady's book, artist's conception of the Queen just before her coronation, from Godey's Ladies book, March 1838. Poor Queen. Okay. Mr. Mackenzie's account admirably illustrates the hand-colored steel engraving of the Queen, which was the book's major embellishment for the month. So that must be what we just looked at. In the same issue was a long article by Mrs. Hale voicing all the propaganda turned loose by Lord Russell. Victoria we consider as the representative of the moral and intellectual influence of a woman, wrote the lady editor. In this view, her accession to the throne is a subject of deep interest to her sex in every quarter of the world. This right moral influence, which woman by her nature is formed to exercise, is the power which a queen may make so effective in promoting the highest and best interests of virtue, learning, social happiness, and national improvement. There never was a time when this moral power might be so gloriously employed as now. The empire of physical might has nearly ceased. The reign of intellect and feeling, a direct quotation from Lord John, should be ushered in by a woman. Victoria has come to the throne under many peculiar advantages. When the moral power of right principles, of truth in its simplicities, is in a measure understood, when woman is taking her true place side by side with man as his companion and helper in the work of civilization and Christian progress. Film in 2023, Boudica, Queen of Born. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I don't know. This is the trouble with research, is things, and if I don't write them down or document them, they just kind of like in one ear and out the other. To the cause of female education as offering the best means of improving the moral conditions of society, we hope that Queen Victoria will devote her most sedulous attention. To us American women, the most interesting act she has performed is the unobtrusive one, recognizing female talent. She has, we understand, pensioned from her private purse 3 eminent literary ladies, Miss Joanna Bailey, Miss Edgeworth, and Miss Mitford. We hope that benefaction is an benefaction is an earnest of the encouragement which she is intending to accord the genius of her own sex. By this means, she will acquire renown as pure as virtue and imperishable as thought. May I prove, by her own pure example, all the things mentioned by Lord John Russell. Here is Victorianism in its incipient stage, yet offering already a fairly complete listing of its important reforms. Morality greatly stressed, the elevation of woman, education, more feeling and less might in government, the conventionalizing of manners and conduct after the pattern of an example. But why did it all take so hard in America? Partial reason is to be found in the fact that America, past its initial stage of experiment in popular government, had come to realize that democracy, even Jacksonian democracy, must needs be in continuous process of revision. Growth was rapidly altering the social fabric. And so the country was fumbling with a number of embryonic ideas looking toward reform, though all too vague as yet to be manifested in much more than an emotional awareness of a need for change. Another reason was that America, after all, was a blood daughter of England. In the midst of a family racket, when parental authority became arrogant, America had marched out of the house and married her lover freedom. Oh my gosh. Ruth Finley and her turn of phrase. I love it. Let me read that again. In the midst of a family racket, when parental authority became arrogant, America had marched out of the house and married her lover freedom. Sharing with Britain. Oh, I'm sorry. But for all that she was still fundamentally English, sharing with Britain a common language and many common institutions. Ever she had taken the mother country's art and letters to heart. And when she hated tyranny of the benighted Georges was over, England finally acknowledging her own dissatisfaction with the tyranny and frankly voicing the hope of a reign of intellect and feeling. The United States took that catchphrase, too, to heart and accepted Victorianism in all its essential aspects. In truth, America became a more ardent devotee of the faith than England itself. Being younger, she was more easily led. Her standards, while of British origin, were less firmly established. Even the stodgy influence of the German prince consort on literature and art, his rigid ideas of morals, his insistence on the ceremonial sacrificing of substance to form, his verbotenism, if one may coin a word, all of which social England, long before Albert's death, came to resist just as Victorians just as Victoria's ministers learned to resist the consort's political dominance of the Queen. America swallowed without discrimination, gulp after gulp, world without end. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, hold on a second before we read this next section. And let's look at these ladies. So these are your Victorian ladies of America in their dress. This says, afternoon gowns were demurely elegant. What's that thing now? Oh gosh, I used the term the other day. It was something in demure. It's become a meme, and now I can't think of what it is, but demure. Okay. Never was there such a pouring of cambric tea. Is that like spilling the tea? I think it is. So never was there such a pouring of cambric tea. It was more copious than the tears of Alice in Wonderland, which formed the pool that so nearly caused her drowning. Almost was America drowned in the cambric flood. It is all but natural that the present-day critic, viewing the flotsam left by those now subsided waters, is appalled by the preponderance of waste disclosed, of feeling, if not intellect. But there were contributory eddies of wholly American source, such as the sudden and enormous increase in printing, due not only to mechanical improvements that reduced costs and time, but also to a general eagerness for erudition. An increasing population, possessed as a whole of only the barest elements of education and of no taste, was resolved to be well informed. Related to this general urge was a longing for literary self-expression on the part of thousands of individuals, themselves only a little better educated than the public they wrote for. And topping all was the upward seething of a national consciousness determined to be recognized and recorded. Here in America, for the first time in the history of the human race, an entire population, not part of it, but potentially the whole, had become so raised in the economic scale that some degree and semblance of culture was indicated for all. Oh my. We're getting ready to become less tasteless. Men and women whose immediate forebears had come to America, sometimes as indentured servants, from a grinding type of hand-to-mouth existence never to be endured by the most poverty-stricken in this country, could, by a mere willingness to work, not only live in comfort, but acquire property. This they saw as a boon beyond price. Honest pride in accomplishment and possession is a healthful stimulant. By 1840, the United States had enormous resources of both stimulation and pride. Every man, woman, and child, from log cabin to white-pillared mansion, wanted to be worthy, to be nice. As Francis M. Whicher expressed it through the still laughable satires of Aunt Maguire, who frequently soliloquized in Godey's in the late 40s and early 50s, everyone had got their IDs raised a good deal and had some wonderful curious notions about gentility. All right. So Aunt Maguire must be like some kind of country person. So everybody had got their ideas raised a good deal and had some wonderful curious notions about gentility. Aunt Maguire's visit to Slabtown in Godey's for December 1849, from which the foregoing is quoted, is an amazingly sophisticated comment on this aspect of the times. Symbolic Slabtown housed a vast public pop-eyed for gentility, a large part of which never before had been reached by the printed word. These admirable people, and they were admirable, were used to working hard. When they set about clearing land, the stumps flew. So when they espoused refinement, they made a thorough job of it. Henry Clay and Robert Fulton cup plates were appendages to every tea set. And if some person stuck out a little finger during the process of drinking from a saucer, perhaps it was just that exacting exercise of controlling the fifth digit that kept them from guzzling. Who knows? So drink your tea, pinkies out. But their brains were incapable of digesting much besides literary pap, well sweetened and weak, exceedingly weak, cambric tea. However, right in the middle of all the jargon, bombast, and piffle, Printed for this new reading public, Poe, Irving, Cooper, Emerson, and Whitman were striving to lay the foundations of an American literature and of American taste. Of course, they were in the lean minority. Turning through the files of Godey's Lady's Book, one wonders how any mind that could read the words could bring itself to peruse the meaningless trash scribbled by the majority. Rhetoric can be relied on to cover a multitude of lacks. In this art, the Victorians excelled. They indulged in elegant language to quote their own measure of literary worth, and it was an indulgence that bordered on inebriety, a weepy inebriety at that. Indeed, latter-day commentators have been put to it to understand why so much of both the prose and verse of the period was doleful. Death was a principal theme, especially youthful death. Classic instances of its employment in prose are familiar in Uncle Tom's Cabin, where three leading characters, Little Eva, St. Clair, and Uncle Tom, were all killed off with much agony of words. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say spoiler alert. So killed off with much agony of words, and in Susan Warner's bestseller, Wide, Wide World, first little Ellen's mother, and then her beloved Miss Alice, fashionably expiring of a delicate decline. There was the death of Beth, too, There was the death of Beth, too, in the later and ever-loved Little Women that won Louisa Alcott her just fame. Poe's prose, as well as his gorgeous rhyming, is similarly tainted, though Lenore, Annabel Lee, and Ulalume, is that how that's pronounced? Ululumi, are not to be confused with the mass of mortuary versifying prevalent during the time. Oh, good Lord. And hand in hand with contemplation of death went the kindred subject heaven, salvation of the soul, hope of eternal life. There is now little comprehension of, or sympathy with, this predominance of the morbid in American Victorian writing. Yet it was but the record of actual tragedy. Viewed against this background, it needs slight apology. Doubtless, modernity, given the same surrounding conditions, would display small self-control. Though no adequate vital statistics were kept in the United States until after 1900, insurance companies based their rates on private calculations showing that since 1880, 20 years have been added to the longevity of average human life. Prior to 1880, society was pathetically helpless before disease, bowing its head in pious submission to frequent and inscrutable visitations of Providence. The death rate of children from membranous croup, cholera infantum, diphtheria, and other contagious diseases is 3 out of every 5 before they reach their 5th year, cried the Lady's Book in June 1869. Wow, 3 out of every 5 are dying from things now that we don't deal with anymore. The toll of men and women under 45 was proportionately large. Every summer saw entire households succumb to typhoid. Tuberculosis, smallpox, cholera, yellow fever were rampant. As far north as Philadelphia, the latter scourge had to be faced. 7,000 persons died in New Orleans in the yellow fever epidemic of 1853. 4,000 in Memphis in 1878. Through long months of terror, the death carts rattled throughout the streets and the harrowing cry, "Bring out your dead." Did they really do that here? I mean, I know "Bring Out Your Dead" is in the Monty Python movie with the Black Plague thing, but on June 29th, 1849, Sarah Hill's friend, Harriet Beecher Stowe, alone in Cincinnati with her 6 children, began a letter to her husband in Vermont, a letter destined not to be mailed for so many days that it took the form of a diary. "My dear husband, the disease, cholera, in the city has been malignant. Carts and common vehicles are employed for the removal of the dead." Well, I guess they were saying, "Bring out your dead." "The sable trains which pass our windows, the haste, the absence of reverent decency, whether we will or no, bring very doleful images to the mind. On Tuesday, 116 deaths were reported. July 1st, this is the finger of God, 120 burials yesterday. July 10th, yesterday little Charlie was taken ill, not seriously, and at any other time I should not be alarmed. July 12th, Around 1 o'clock this morning, Miss Stewart opened my door crying, "Miss Stowe, Henry is vomiting." Charlie is getting better and is suspiciously cross. Never was crossness in a baby more admired. July 17th, Aunt Frankie, who it says was a Negro servant, died yesterday morning. And now our poor little dog Daisy, who had been ailing the day before, was suddenly seized with frightful spasms and died half an hour later. Oh my gosh, dogs can get cholera too? I mean, we're assuming that's what's happening here with him or her. July 23rd. At last, my dear, the hand of the Lord hath touched us. Little Charlie is gone. I write as though there were no sorrow like my sorrow. Yet there has been in this city, as in the land of Egypt, scarce a house without its dead. Whew. Wow. So let's see. Charlie first got sick. What, July 10th? Yeah, July 10th. Little Charlie gets sick. He's seeming better on July 12th. But by July 23rd, he's dead. Yeah, I mean, this is what we hear about that time period. I mean, it's not a secret. People died a lot. Such epidemics were acute instances of mortality. But there was also a chronic drain of life. Persons singly were smitten. They died or lived to give thanks for being spared, as chance decreed. Though there were many ailments now under a high degree of scientific control, which until late in the 19th century were almost invariably fatal. Appendicitis was one, called inflammation of the bowels. Pneumonia or lung fever was another. With death always so close at hand, the fearful familiar of every home, scarcely is its influence on the thought of the people to be wondered at. Surely there was no avoiding the very doleful images it brought to mind. Opening at random a bound volume of Godey's for 1850, one finds the pages falling apart at some verses called Springtime Musings by Adeliza Cutter, a once popular writer now totally forgotten. These stanzas, 11 in number, are divided into 2 groups of 5 each, followed by the inevitable envoy pointing the moral. Each of the first 5 begins, "They'll come once more." They'll come once more, the green trees gently waving, leaves on the spray and grass blades on the hill, sunshine, flowers, birds, these will come again. But oh, they'll come no more, the friends we cherished, in their bright dwelling who of us can find? They'll come no more the hopes. Phew. Yes, cholera is terrible. I know it ends. I'm trying to remember a book I read about. I mean, I think it was entirely about cholera. And I mean, it's a sad thing. But yeah, it's you basically like poop yourself to death. That's what happens. And, you know, people ended up like complicating cholera before they knew what was happening because they would drink contaminated water and then have, you know, the horrible, horrible dehydration and diarrhea, and they'd keep drinking the water. So, you know, the late 1800s, I think that's where we're getting some advancements in science. Like, I think they understood that, like, some tiny organisms cause disease. Like, they understood bacteria. They were starting to, so, you know, battlefield medicine from the Civil War brought in surgical interventions. And then also at this time period, we have anesthesia. So, you know, we're getting there. But it wasn't until, gosh, what year was penicillin? Was that in the 20s? I think penicillin was like the early 20s or the late teens. So, you know, yeah, it's sad. It's truly sad, you know, and people just don't know any better. And, you know, science hasn't gotten there yet. Okay. Neither dreams nor the sweet, earnest feeling of ambition would come again. Plans for the future, joy in the present, all seemed rather futile to Adeliza, who herself might be stricken at any hour. But finally, they'll come once more, yes. With our spirit vision, we gaze far, far away to realms above. There, mid sacred groves and fields Elysian, they come once more, friends, bright hopes, faith, and love. In an editorial for May 1849, Mrs. Hale, anticipating the usual grim harvest of the summer months, had made her first plea for what was to be known many years later as the public playground. Did they not know that wine was safer than water? I think in the case of not understanding that cholera was a waterborne disease, and it was bad in cities because you could have like one source of water that was contaminated. So I think at times they did not connect the two. Yeah. And I know I'm trying to, I don't know why I'm completely blanking on what I read about. I can't remember if it was an article. I know it was something long form, but I'm trying to think, did I read an entire book about cholera? It really got into those details. And so, yeah, it was like they had some idea, but they kind of didn't. And, it was pretty easy for people to just, I need a drink of water. And really with babies, like, what are you going to do with babies and children? Like, they need to drink water. You can't feed them wine extensively. I mean, I know at this time they did, but so the public playground, and how is it with the little children of our American cities in general, she asked, where are the pleasant places for those whose parents are unable to leave the city during the hot summer months? The public squares are very neatly kept, and there the children may have the freedom of the gravel walks. But they must be careful not to set their little weary, dusty feet on the green, soft grass. Yet surely there are places where this freedom might be permitted. There are squares, not yet laid out in walks. What beautiful playgrounds for children these fresh, pleasant places would be! The sickness and mortality among city children during the hot months is frightful. Many of the diseases are owing to the want of places where these young beings can have free exercise and fresh air. So I think that this time, so this is 1849. I mean, there's still kind of that, miasma theory that it's like bad clouds of, stale air have disease in them, which in some ways can be true. It's not really miasma. It's just other people's breath and coughing and stuff. But I think it probably still was this aspect of good fresh air is what you need. So how does Sarah Hale know that in 1849? Nobody else seems to have thought of it, but exercise and fresh air were her hobbies, for women as well as children. Women, she insisted, would be happier if they were strong. They would be more beautiful, more intelligent, more able, she insinuated, to control their own destinies. Tooth and nail she fought the conventional Victorian idea that physical frailty in women was an asset, an attraction. The ladies' book abounds in lessons in calisthenics for ladies, in home exercises, all carefully illustrated and diagrammed. Year after year, strange-looking female figures in stranger postures are shown. Thus was encouraged a stretching of muscles on the part of wasp-waisted creatures who never in their lives had breathed from their diaphragms. Poets might sigh over death. Sarah Hale thought illness could be prevented. And just as she never halted in her campaign for education, so she kept pounding away at health and sanitation. She deplored tight corsets, airless sleeping rooms, overeating, and pie for breakfast. Okay, Sarah, I'm sorry. Pie for breakfast is okay. She advocated bathing. Not daily bathing, of course, but its forerunner, the once-a-week Saturday night bath. She did not argue over much. Her method was to assume that all really sophisticated persons agreed with her. The days of feather beds may be considered as entirely past among people who have sufficient good sense and education to understand their enervating unhealthiness. Oh. If there's pie in the house, it's for breakfast, right, Robin? Same. So she's saying that feather beds are unhealthy. Is it because they're full of dust? I don't know. She blandly announced in August 1855, It requires a little courage at first to persist in the use of a mattress when a person has been otherwise educated, but the gain in comfort more than repays the trial, leaving all other advantages aside. Okay, well, I guess she's saying that mattresses are better than feather beds. In 1856, Mrs. Hale suggested that girls, young ladies, mind you, be taught so tomboy an art as swimming. Her claim here was that travel by steamboat had made swimming a precautionary as well as helpful accomplishment. So know how to swim in case your steamboat goes down. Here's a Philadelphia equestrian. It's a little engraving. That says, when she was mounted, her skirts swept within a foot of the ground. Oh, Lord. That's a way for your horse to stumble and, like, toss you on the ground. All right. The lady editor had never heard of the psychology of fear. Yeah, Robin, I agree. I mean, I think swimming is one of those things that, I mean, I guess if you don't live near any bodies of water, and you're never going to be on any body of water, then I guess it's okay not to learn how to swim. But I feel like swimming is one of those skills that, in riding a bike, you know, these are things that, like, all people should learn. So the lady editor had never heard of the psychology of fear, yet she employed it like a modern advertiser. While horseback riding of necessity had become popular with women as with men from time immemorial, Mrs. Hale saw that this invigorating exercise was threatened by newer and quicker means of transportation. Oh, yeah, sure. Let me finish this paragraph and I'll show you. Immediately she became a riding enthusiast. How beautifying to the female figure riding was, she exclaimed, and forthwith published many a steel engraving picturing lovely lady on horseback. Women were not to be permitted to forget their one traditional form of outdoor exercise. Okay, so here we go. Here's the equestrian. And look at her nice long skirt, which will drag. It's only a foot from the ground, and the horse is going to, like, get its foot caught up in there and rip her down off the saddle. Another outdoor enthusiasm of Mrs. Hale was the picnic, not yet become one word. And it's listed as PIC-NIC, like a space in between pick and nick. The felicity of such excursions into the open was celebrated by Godey's in song, story, and steel engraving. These three lend assurance that any young lady who went on a picnic in 1850 came home engaged to the beau of the hour. Be sure to go on a picnic, for you too shall become engaged. Who could resist the promise of a day spent in dancing, fishing, walking in the woods, as described in the book for July 1849 and pictured by the engraver Croom? In the background of the artist's sketch are myriad happy couples dancing. I guess we don't have a picture of this. Let me see. Nah, they don't give us a picture of this. While in the foreground, it seems impossible, but it is true, are two smiling maidens ensconced under a tree with the arms of their accompanying gallants cozily encircling their waist. A little lovemaking scene behind a century-old oak, happily introduced by the artist. The picture is not depressingly Victorian. Equally un-Victorian was the fun the lady editor poked now and then at hoop skirts, even though the Queen approved of them. They made Victoria look taller and doubtless also helped to conceal her indifferent walk, which I believe was described as a waddle. The following jibe at this sacred Victorian fashion, the Queen was lucky in that her favorite skirt stayed in style for a full half century, appeared in Godey's for July 1856, unsigned. It cannot be, the lady said right mockingly. Fain would I grant a parting kiss, but how can it be done in this? She pointed to her wide hoop dress, and he sighed deep in dire distress. He walked the lady round and round. She seemed entrenched upon a mound, securely spanned and fortified, as if all lovers she defied. You'd say, if you that hoop could see, a war hoop it was meant to be. He walked around the lady round, then sank all weary on the ground. I'm sold, quoth he, 'tis all no go. Oh, love, how could you treat me so? Farewell, in foreign lands I'll range, at least until the fashions change. Gradually, the absurdities and errors were piling up. No longer was the age of Victoria a mere protest against the century preceding. As decade capped decade, it began to function on its own. Not until the Queen's retirement into selfish widowhood in 1861 did Victorianism really get all its tassels tied on. After the death of the Prince Consort, the Queen grew increasingly morbid. Disinclined herself to perform her public duties, she would not permit her son, the future Edward VII, to represent her. His was a free spirit. The widow of Windsor stood for inhibition. It was not always so. As the daughter of a roistering father, in the charge of a mother whose supervision of her girlhood was so incessant as to deny her the simplest pleasures, the young queen had craved somewhat of the sparkle of life. But that was in the far past, before ever the staid Albert converted her to gloom. And now that her dear Albert was gone, the zeal of her piety brooked no bounds. In his name, she went to the extreme of dogmatism, her long suppressed yet characteristic arrogance at last asserting itself. Let's see how much longer we have. Oh, just a couple more pages. Okay. I was going to say, this goes on forever. In the spirit of that arrogance, the widowed Victoria developed a passion for memorials to Albert. We do know this. Oh, yeah, you're thinking so too, but still I would not be trusting my dress dragon close to the ground. Yeah, I don't think I would happily get on a horse that, oh, yeah, she would be riding side saddle. I would think so. Yeah, like Druid said. But yeah, with your dress, I just feel like a horse, it could easily get its leg caught, couldn't it? I don't know. I'm not a horse person. Okay. So she developed a passion for memorials to Albert. At Balmoral and Osborne, the homes the prince had loved best, she erected innumerable statues and shrines and cairns in memory of their days together. And she let it be known that she considered it incumbent upon the principal cities of her kingdom likewise to perpetuate the memory of the man who had so completely controlled her intellect and absorbed her emotions. Monuments became the craze. Even in the United States, where the Civil War ending on a high note of patriotism, soldiers' monuments were erected in every town larger than a crossroad, all of them alike, the familiar bearded feature arrayed on the accoutrements of war, including fatigue cap and musket that still graces the village green. No, they don't grace them anymore. That's a good note, Druid. There's strings or something on the dress to hold it in a secure way. Okay, that makes sense. And I know a lot about costuming, but I think that, certainly women that flowing dresses on horseback for Instagram. I know that women, it seems to me like the riding, like equestrianism, I know that they had specific garments for that. So I'm guessing, I just don't know much about those garments. But it does make sense that even, you wouldn't be wearing a hoop skirt on a horse. Your hoop would be. So yeah, I would guess that there probably were some kind of thing. Okay. The Albert Memorial in London outdistanced all competition. It had been conceived by an architect named Scott, and his plan had pleased the Queen greatly. The design was particularly appropriate, says Strachey, since it chanced that a similar conception, though the reverse in magnitude, had occurred to the prince himself, who had executed several silver cruet stands upon the same model. Okay, so this was quoted from Queen Victoria by Leighton Strachey. I guess this was a book about Queen Victoria written in 1921. So, which settles another question long vexing American purists and tastes: the whence and the wherefore of the everywhere popular Victorian table caster. Okay, we're getting into Victorian tableware now. An easy comprehension of the 19th century is to view it as a play divided into 3 acts. The first act, its scenes covering the years from 1800 to 1837, present the problem, the reason for all the tragedy, comedy, mystery, and intrigue that is to follow. Here culminate the rags and tags of the 18th century. Here, too, is transition, the spanning of a break in social evolution. Monarchy has been challenged. Popular rule seeks to find itself. The second act, whose last scene in America was the Civil War, like all good second acts, offers development of the theme. First, one remedial measure, one solution is tried. Then another, a very human act full of cross purposes, unassimilated experience, where absurdities and errors play ever and again upstage until the tragic climax. And then the third act, with its surprise denouement, reconstruction rather than mere readjustment, the ascendance of machines by aid of which Americans might quickly turn to profit all of the varied physical resources of a geographically enormous country. Fools dream as well as wise men, and fools as well as wise men dreamed dreams of vast riches for the taking and of great controlling power. The decades of this act lead to the formation of would-be monopolies. Ah, yes, the captains of industry. The monopoly barons, the robber barons. Here was a huge grasping and seizing, individual and corporate, that on big scale imitated the stampedes with which new tracts of government land were opened. Each rider was out to stake a claim, the best claim regardless. Every man sought his own pinnacle of rock on which to stand, as stood the hero of the period's favorite melodrama, Monte Cristo. With arms upflung, crying in a great voice, "The world is mine." This atmosphere of self-assertion permeated all society, top, middle, and bottom. This is the era of manifest destiny, is it not? Let's see. Have you ever seen Queen Elizabeth II Trooping the Color in 1981? During the parade, there was an assassination attempt on her life. I did not know that. She rode a horse named Burmese, which was given to her by Royal Canadian Mounted Police. She was riding side saddle. She was an exceptional equestrian. Yeah, from what I understand, like she actually had some really interesting talents. I mean, I guess say what you want about her. Queen Elizabeth was an interesting lady, and she had some qualities that I think were very, very admirable. So, this atmosphere of self-assertion permeated all society, top, middle, and bottom. It affected all contacts and seeped into family life. Even the old queen herself, jealous of the growing popularity of the Prince of Wales, came out of her seclusion to be hailed as Empress of India. Oh, that was bad. And to preside at her jubilees. Dominance was in the air, and because the home is the miniature of all relationships and activities, there was scarcely a household in which the struggle was not on for supremacy. Between husband and wife, between parents and children, it was a struggle of bitterness, selfishness, and unkindliness, the forerunner of another moral and social change in the public mind. Oh, her horse bolted. Wow, I'm going to have to look that up. I mean, 1981, my gosh, how old was she? I mean, she had to have been like, what, in her 60s at least at that point. I'm trying to do math in my head, and I'm never very capable at that. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about a woman who, I mean, she's up there in years. So yeah, that's pretty cool. All right. Not yet passable is it to view this last act of Victorianism with balanced perspective. It is all too close and vivid a yesterday. The effects of the inhibitions it thrust upon their youth is too sharp in the memories of men and women still living. As in the instance of the monumental cruet stands, its depressing ornateness of form obscures the sterling value of its metal. For the 20th century, it was this last act with its struggle for dominance, relentless however camouflaged by professions of piety, that has colored the whole play. Sarah Hale was the first act. She was a product of the 18th century, the abandon of which she knew at first hand and hated. She was of the second act, sympathetic, with the revolt from Georgian coarseness and hardness, eager for reform, ambitious for the success of popular rule, and all it implied for the common man and women in better standards of living and wider opportunities for culture. She saw only the first scenes of the third act, the far swing of the Victorian pendulum, the full triumph of form over substance she did not live to see. Nor did she see the new revolt of the gay 90s, gayer in legend than fact, that girded itself to crush Victorianism even as Victorianism had crushed the age of the Georges. In all three acts, she was herself a Victorian, in that no convention harmless to reform was broken by her. And if in the observance of convention she too was absurd, which she was, it was an absurdity that won and kept the confidence of her more absurd public. Yet throughout her scenes of the play, she was equally a modern, in that she defied any convention hostile to a better day, in that she visioned that better day and worked towards it. Wow. So that was a totally different chapter than I expected it to be. That was a long one. Yes, I've gone over significantly, but yeah, that was different than I expected it to be. But oh my goodness, we brushed up on some British royal history stuff I think I should have known. Now that I think about it, the Georges obviously were really important at the end of. Well, it was the King George tyranny that the United States or, America was fleeing from. And, that was the Georgian period. Yeah. So, and the Charlotte and Leopold and all that, the connection to Victoria. I should have known all these things. So, all right, you guys. That'll do it for today. We are still only halfway through this book, not even. So you're going to keep plugging away at it. So Monday, I'm going to throw this out there just so you guys are aware. Just watched when the availability. She did a wonderful job remaining calm and handling the horse. Cool. Thank you for sharing that link, Robin. I'll have to look at this after I sign off. Yeah. Let me open this now so that I'll have it ready to go.
You go to use the bathroom and your underwear is so wet in the
I got a Lumi commercial going on. You guys can probably hear that. So yes, Drew, it was a very nice afternoon read. It's an interesting one. So Monday, what I was going to say, I'm going to be traveling back on Monday. It is my plan to be home long before 2 p.m. Eastern. But just in case, keep an eye on the Facebook page. If for some reason I need to cancel because of, I don't know, I'm knocking on wood. Traffic around here can be so insanely unpredictable. If for some reason I get stuck and not back in time, I will post on the page. So just keep an eye out for that. But I'll give it 95%. I'm 95% sure I will be back here at 2 p.m. on Monday. So, I will look forward to getting you guys some interesting pictures and footage from what I see this weekend at the Folk Festival. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Anybody who is in the range of, is it Helena? I can't remember what our latest hurricane is, but stay safe. Don't go in the water if you don't know how to swim. Take care, you guys. Have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday. Mwah, 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 mwah.